Hello, everyone. Welcome to Margin Time, the favorite podcast among people who are bad at the video game. My name is Trashboat, and today we have a special interview with a longtime friend of the pod in more ways than one, Ashley Jenkins.
I'm Ashley.
Welcome. As many of you may know of Ashley, as she has been around the community, she was here for Poochie Carrots Wednesday, and we're going to be talking a bit more about Poochie Carrot also. But Ashley has a very special game that is a very special sequel to a very special Petal Crash 2. And we're not
It's
just talking
two.
about we won't just be talking about Petal Crash 2, but maybe some other stuff that you've done. How's the process, maybe other games you enjoy. But let's just get started. First question, how did you get the idea for Petal Crash 1?
Okay, so here the story goes, and by the story goes, I mean this is what happened. I spent a long time on my first game, Grapple Force Arena, which I was like just starting out as an indie developer when I started that game, and obviously like I committed the indie game sin of like kind of my eyes too big for my stomach, kind of starting a project that would have been a whole lot of work to finish.
Uh-huh.
But I did finish it. It took a very long time. I worked on it for like 5 years or so, which
Wow.
is it's a long time, but it's also not too unusual for like an overscoped indie game time for
No,
development for
it's
one
got a
person.
lot of stuff going for it, so that it makes
Oh,
sense. It's
thank you.
it's got very high like production value. Um, for
Yeah.
that to have been sort of like now when you say it was, I think like when you say like your first or like you started as in the game,
Yeah.
Dev, was
Well,
that sort of like your first or maybe your first big project?
it was my first big project. Like, I obviously didn't start from zero and spend 5 years making a video game and release it. Um, but it was not even really technically my first commercial game. Um, but it was basically like my debut as like an indie game career person.
Okay.
Um, so the story of how this relates to Petal Crash is, so I spent a whole lot of time on it, and I had like very high hopes for its release. Like I thought it was gonna sell like at least like a few thousand copies in the first couple of months, and then I'll get all this money, and it would be really great.
Mhm.
But it ended up like underperforming pretty severely in
Oh.
comparison to my expectations and the expectations of the publisher, who thankfully is like a friend and not like somebody who is going to destroy me over it.
Okay.
um,
Very good.
yeah, that would be Sabrina from Galaxy Trail. She was very supportive throughout the whole thing.
Oh, that's
I'm
so
like,
nice.
yeah, I'm very grateful. Like when it ended up underperforming, like her primary concern was that I was going to be okay. So, like, I am extremely grateful for the support I had in Sabrina. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so Grab Force Arena comes out and it doesn't really do very well. And like finishing a huge project is always kind of like you get into sort of a bit of a depressive funk after. That's like a normal thing. So I was on top of like that, on top of my disappointment about like this project I spent 5 years on underperforming. I was kind of really down in the dumps at the time. And I remembered reading in some like article or something, like some study they did, where if you like had like a traumatic experience or like a really hard time of something, that if you then played a whole bunch of Tetris, the Tetris would like engage a part of your brain differently or some such that like the negative feelings wouldn't take hold like as severely or as long lasting of a
Yeah,
place.
I remember that. It was I don't remember the exact terminology I use either, but it was basically like, playing Tetris sort of helps you either cope with trauma or it sort of helps you deal with it, smooth it over, sort of lets it pass by your mind. Because I guess the way that you have to think about Tetris or placing your stuff, or maybe the way it causes you to focus, can take
Yeah.
your mind off the traumatic experience.
Yeah, so instead of Tetris in particular, I decided I'm gonna like to sort of like distract myself from being in this funk. I'm gonna like get really into old arcade puzzle games because I always really liked old arcade puzzle games, like even before this.
If we had a nickel for every time somebody said that around here.
Hey, this is me going into the we like old arcade puzzle games house and being like, I like old arcade puzzle games.
True, very true.
Um, so yeah, basically I spent a bunch of time just like I'm gonna play all these old puzzle games to like kind of just distract myself from my moping about this game not doing well. Um, and so that's when I, for example, like I played like Cleopatra Fortune. This is when I got like really big into Poochie Carrot. I played like
Mm-hmm.
Saldom. I played
Saldam?
Saldam, Landmaker. Like this is when I was discovering all those games and playing them. And just like playing all those games, like I've got game designer brain. So it just made me like think about and compare like all of the mechanics of these different puzzle games. Yeah, I did
Mhm.
specifically go down the Taito rabbit
Yeah.
hole. Um so I would just think constantly about like all these different puzzle games and like their mechanics, and I don't know where exactly like it led just from thinking about this and like brainstorming. I was thinking about like if I made a puzzle game, like what would it be like? And um I actually have like a date pinned to like exactly when this night was because I prototyped it the next morning and like have the
Oh,
timestamp on like the GIFs. The night was April 18th, 2019. I had this idea.
wow. That's
Yeah. Um,
that's. Go
that's what.
ahead. I was thinking that was like really close to probably about the time that I had sort of got super into Puzzle Fighter, and probably about the time that I think that Perfect Clear was announced, which was it was supposed to be sort of like a fighting game major, but puzzle game focused. So again, it's just sort of a bit of a quinky dink.
Those puzzle games were like in the zeitgeist, I guess.
Yeah, they, they were
Yeah,
they were
they
having a
were
bit of a
overdue
moment.
for a comeback, in my opinion. Anyway. Um, so I had this idea. My original idea for the prototype was like a lot more complicated. Like I had this idea that like it would be a game where you're like a little guy running around on a board and pushing blocks.
Eh,
And so like the first thing I prototyped was just like the idea of the block interactions, where I had this idea like you're running around and you're pushing these blocks and then they like match and blow up and then those like push other blocks, and that would be like some kind of fun like cascading mechanic. Um,
wow.
but you'd be like a little guy pushing them.
Yeah,
Um,
so it'd be like Wario's Crash or Wario's
yeah,
Petal.
it'd be like Wario's Woods Crash, which I feel like that could be like a fun thing to explore someday. The idea of like a pedal crash where you're a little guy moving around. Um, but so the next morning, I had this idea and I like wrote down about it, like talked about it with my friends, like being like I've been playing all these puzzle games and I had this idea. Um, and then I went to bed, and then the next morning I like decided to like prototype my idea for the block interactions. So I like made the little board with the blocks that you push around and then they blow up and push the other ones next to them, and I was like, wait a minute, this is great. Like I was like, uh
Oh yeah, no,
oh.
you had a banger on your hands.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, I immediately knew. I was like, wait a minute. This is like, I don't need to put in a little guy running around. Like, this is already like, there's a lot of depth to it. Like, because in the original prototype, I didn't have the idea for like how blocks would appear on the board yet. It would just like give me a random board of blocks, and then I would just go in and like try to arrange the biggest chain reaction I can, and I would just sit there like refreshing like
Mhm.
the game build and like getting a new board and then trying to put a big new chain together, and it just really got it hooked into my puzzle brain like right away.
Okay.
Yeah, so like after that I was like, as soon as I started messing with it, I was like, this is this has got to be my next project. Like, I really stumbled across something really special. Like, before my idea for my next project, I was like working on a game that was like a game inspired by the arcade game Rampart, which is kind of a puzzle adjacent game where you
Mhm.
build a castle and out of like Tetris pieces, and then you like shoot the other castle. Um, I had like that was another game I became like oddly obsessed with for a little while,
Mhm.
and I had ideas for like how to like iterate on the idea of it. Um, but I was like struggling with it a lot and like constantly like revising my ideas of like the mechanics because like Rampart was like a very kind of experimental game, sort of in the days before like game design was really nailed down as like a study.
Yeah.
So it was just very much like a kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall game of like, what if we
Yeah.
had like a Tetrisy game with shooting in it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's all the same.
Yeah. So I was like kind of struggling a bit with how to like turn that into something that's like a bit more polished and intentionally designed and like try to lock in on the stuff that's fun about it and cut out the stuff that's not fun about it.
Yeah.
Um but this was coming together like immediately in comparison. This new project was like, oh, I already see how this is fun and like what direction it could go.
Okay, then so just from like just to sort of like maybe I guess recap, right? Grapple Force Reina underperformed. Got understandably sad about it.
Hmm.
You read an article about how Tetris makes people feel better. You
Oh,
go down.
I'd already read that article a while ago, so I just remembered it.
uh, it's kind of like one of the anime flashback. You had an anime flashback about a Tetris study.
Yeah.
Perhaps right.
Yeah.
Um, that sends you down the Taito arcade game rabbit hole,
Yes.
and then you have a vision, possibly from a fairy, delivered,
Yeah, I
not
got a
confirmed
fairy
enough,
vision.
a fairy vision, and you prototype what will be Pedal Crash
Yeah.
eventually. So this is amazing. How did it I guess why the name Pedal Crash? Again, it works, but just curious about maybe why that and not
Uh,
just
oh yeah.
Guy Crash or something, or
I
Slidey
actually
Slidey Whitey or whatever other
I
you
I do
use.
actually have an interesting answer for that. I can tell you my whole process. Um, I I also posted a little GIF of like the earliest prototype in the bracket management thing. If we can get that on stream, but if not, it's no big deal. Um, yeah. So where the name Petal Crash came from. So this was at the height of my Poochie Carrot rabbit hole obsession of like learning all about all the lore and characters and such. And around that time, I noticed that like a lot of puzzle games characters, the characters were like had like they were like a themed set around something. Like
Mhm.
for Magical Drop, every character is based on a tarot card. In Penalty Pone, every fairy is like an element fairy.
Yeah.
In Poochie Carrot, every character is associated with a gem. So I tried to think of like if I want to make a game that's like thematically similar to these other ones, I had to think of like what theme can I theme the characters around that hasn't been done already. And I quickly came around the idea of flowers. Like every character is based around a different flower. So um
Okay.
that was like the genesis of the idea that like I wanted the characters to be like themed after something of like a set. I'd considered stuff like looking up like flower languages or like what flower is associated with your birth month or whatever, but I ended up just kind of picking the flowers largely arbitrarily.
Hey,
Uh,
it works out great.
Thank you. So I having the concept of the characters are based around flowers, then I was like, okay, the blocks can be decorated like they're flowers. So
Mhm.
I made little flower graphics for all the blocks. And my first idea for the game name was Blossom Crash. Um, because like the crash part is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
like it's the way the mechanics work. The blocks crash together and then blow up, and then they also crash together. And like something crash is a very like puzzle gamey name, like how you have Candy
Very.
Crush, which
Yes.
it was not meant to evoke Candy Crush for the record.
No, that's fine. I'm a Candy Crush player occasionally.
Yeah. So something crash, it's flower themed. Blossom Crash was the first idea, and I was like, Blossom Crash are like other flowery words, petal crash, and then I was like, oh, petal crash is catchier.
Hmm.
And so I was thinking either Blossom Crash or Petal Crash, and then a bunch of my friends were like Petal Crash, and I was like, yeah, you're right.
No, it's
Definitely Petal Crash.
yeah, it works out better. It's really great. Okay, so that's really good. I guess sort of you've kind of answered a good amount of stuff I was sort of curious about. But one thing, sort of like before Grapple Force Reina and Pedal Crash, what was sort of your like maybe game dev experience, not just on the programming side, but also like how long you practice like maybe pixel art too, and sort of preparing you for like the Pedal Crash stuff that you do now.
When I was a baby.
Wow.
Not literally when I was a baby, but when I was young, like in middle school, I came across the Sonic fan game scene, which is where like a whole lot of indie devs around in my generation got their start.
Boy.
And so what I ended up like really focusing in on, like I would dabble in the actual like game making parts. I would like get everybody use like Click Team software,
Mm-hmm.
like the Games Factory, which is really exciting to me. As somebody who always wanted to make games as a kid. So I learned how to use the Games Factory, and I also got really big into sprite editing.
Yeah.
Like a big thing back then was you would
The Mega Man edits.
yeah, like I was also involved a bit in sprite comics too for the same like
Ah,
reasons.
okay. Yeah, okay.
Um so like sprite editing was a big thing that I focused in on really heavily. And that's where I got my start doing pixel art. Is as a middle schooler doing Sonic sprite edits. Um, the first time I did in like my adult life, uh, I actually me and my friend Chess entered a like game jam type contest for a video game website called Egra that's like not really around anymore.
Mm.
Um, they like ran a little game design contest where it's like to make a little game themed around the idea of colors, and there was like cash prizes, and we got second.
Great.
So our game that we made, and it was mostly me. Like we like got teamed up for the idea and stuff, but I ended up kind of doing most of it. Um, but we also had my friend Jared in on music, and Chess like did the main character sprites and the character design. And then I did like the programming and most of like the design stuff. So it was a game called Spectrum Spelunker, and it was kind of like it was described by one of the reviewers as like a quote unquote horizontal Mr. Driller. It was it was kind of like a puzzle platform hybrid game where you were this little blob creature called Hue, like HUE, like
Mm-hmm.
colors,
Yeah.
and
Color. I get it.
you like ran across a field of like randomly generated colored blocks. Um, and the idea was that using your various like movement texts, you could like wall jump or double jump, you could do a downward stomp, and all of those would be if you did them on a block, it would push the block. And then if you push like a block into another block, it would like push that entire row or column. And the idea is that you wanted to assemble as big of a chunk of the same color as you can, and then you would like shoot it, and it would detonate all of the blocks in that cluster. And the longer the cluster was, the more points you would get.
Okay.
And as the game went on, like the block patterns started to get more complicated. There would be more
Yeah.
like garbage blocks mixed in. The screen would also scroll faster. So it would, and if you fell off the screen, you like died, and the game was over.
Ouch. Okay,
So
so yeah.
it was a very like arcade puzzle game in spirit
No,
in that regard.
it's very sort of interesting idea, very has a lot of stuff going on for it, probably, in terms of like how you would program the randomization and how it sort of mixes up stuff to get harder as
Yeah,
time
yeah,
goes
yeah.
on, like okay, so that was like that was really good. So like we know that everyone here knows, everyone who's a big fan, we all know. We know that Poochie Carrot and Petal Crash share a lot of DNA. We all know
Yeah.
the twins are there, the theming is there. But were there any other games like that you think you would say probably may have inspired Petal Crash, or like, any implementation of like mechanics or theming or arts, or of something of that nature?
Yeah. Well, like, mechanically, Petal Crash has like nothing in common with Poochie Carrot. Well, I wouldn't say nothing, but like Poochie Carrot was not an inspiration in its mechanics. It was like a
Yeah,
breakout game.
yeah.
It's very different. Other games that I could cite as like things that directly inspired things in Petal Crash specifically. Um, Landmaker was also an inspiration. Um, so everybody knows I stole the twins. Um, but there's Yosodi actually. Their DNA has a lot of Yoan Landmaker in it.
Yeah, that's and not just like maybe the names are similar, but also sort of with the non-binary or gender that they, their gender expression is also sort of similar, because I remember you've mentioned in how like Yoan from, I think, the Japanese translation, they were more explicitly non-binary, but in America they kind of chickened out and I think put them as either a girl
Well,
or something.
the way
They,
it worked was in the Japanese version, Yoan was a boy,
okay.
and then in the U.S., but he was like a very feminine boy.
Mhm.
And then in the U.S. version, they're like, "Oh, we'll make this character a girl because having a feminine boy in a game is like illegal in
Yeah.
America."
Yeah.
So, like when I was like, Yoan was my favorite character in Landmaker, and when I was thinking up designs for characters in Petal Crush, I had them in mind, and sort of the idea of making Yasodi non-binary. What came from that idea of like, oh, this character that I'm sort of inspired by was like presented as both like a boy and a girl. So like that, the idea of like making a character that was that more intentionally, I thought was fun.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. I'm not as landmaker knowledgeable, but thank you for clearing that up. So about that, let me see if so I want to talk a little bit about PCO to some degree. Now when you first made Pedal Crash, right? It was not rollback ready. I think,
No way.
but I guess when did you sort of realize that rollback was an option, and sort of when it did become when you did start to sort of work on it, what was sort of the, I guess, maybe not the whole process, but how difficult was it to sort of remake Pedal Crash for rollback, and do you think it was worth it?
Um, it was definitely worth it. Absolutely worth it. So, when I made Petal Crash, I planned to support it with updates after it came out, but I didn't know like what people would latch onto. I didn't know what part of the game would be the most popular part. Like it had, for example, like it had that puzzle mode and it had the puzzle editor where you could like
Mhm.
share puzzle codes.
Yeah,
I honestly thought that was going to be like way more popular than like the competitive aspect of the game.
I
But I
see.
I didn't know for sure. So my plan was that like I would make the base game and release it, and then based on the response is where I would focus my time for updates.
Ah,
So so after Petal Crash came out, the popular thing for it was the versus mode, especially against the CPU opponent. My friend Jill, who helped me about with the puzzle codes, um, ended up also offering to help with the AI, and I like went to her house for like a weekend, and like we spent the entire weekend just like inventing this AI that can play this game. Where I had to like walk her through how to like re-implement all of the mechanics into like a formula where you could like plug in a board and a move and it would spit out the results. And then we did that, and we could have the AI like simulate like thousands of moves to like
Okay.
find, because the AI in Petal Crash can actually only search like 2 levels down. But because of the way the game works, if they like set up a chain, it'll like reevaluate and then like, oh, I can make this chain longer.
Okay, so it knows how to do the N+1 form of chain building.
Yeah, exactly. Like the method of chain building that like the tutorial talks about, where you just like you build a chain and then you see if there's stuff nearby you can add on to it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I got off track. Jill, my friend Jill, helped me with the AI. So the AI for Petal Crash was like really good because it
Yes.
was made by not me.
Oh, please.
Well, I helped, but it was primarily made by Jill.
Yeah.
But I helped like guide the approach of how to handle it from my understanding of how the game worked. And so the game ended up having, thankfully, a very high skill ceiling. In testing, like we came across some issues that like led to some like degenerate strategies, but we were able to correct them in ways that were like pretty elegant. And the game ended
Okay.
up having this very high skill ceiling. So people who played it and liked it, like they got a lot of juice out of it. Like, cause they could
Mm.
like, oh, we played it, and I was like, oh, now I can beat the normal mode without continuing.
Yeah.
Now I gotta see if I can try to beat the hard mode, and then there's the expert mode, and then the master mode after that.
Yeah.
And then there was also, after all of that, the secret skull AI, which was basically like the limiters off purist
Mhm.
version of the
Yeah.
AI. So like even after people exhausted all of the like legitimate difficulty levels,
Yeah.
there was still this like final challenge waiting for them.
Yeah.
So uh sorry I'm going off all these tangents,
No,
but
no.
this does link into PCO. So
Yeah.
the competitive aspect of the game was the most popular. So
Yeah.
very quickly what people wanted was to be able to play it online with other people. Especially because like COVID was now happening. It
Yeah.
wasn't happening when I started making Petal Crash,
Yeah.
but now it was. So any multiplayer game basically had to be online now to be
Mhm.
like have a multiplayer scene at all. So around when Petal Crash was announced, like not even released, Nova came to me like showing me a GIF of like an actual Game Boy Color version of the game running because
Mm.
I've mentioned this before, but the trailer for Petal Crash like presents it like it's a Game Boy Color game, but it has a
Yeah.
disclaimer where it's not really.
Yeah.
And Novo's like, "Oh, not really, huh?" Oh,
But now that's changing. Petal Crash
yeah,
Game Boy Color coming out soon.
yeah. So she made this prototype, and like, at the time, I was like, I thought it was very cool, but I was also a little anxious about like, oh, people are cloning my game already. I haven't even had a
Yeah.
chance to release it yet. So,
Mhm.
um, around that time, I was like, maybe we could make this like an official port or something. And Nova worked on that as like a hobby thing while I was making the actual game.
Mhm.
And so down the line, I was like, so me and Nova like became friends. We like talked a bunch. Like we didn't really know each other before then, but then we did after. And
Okay.
she talked about her ideas for like her own puzzle game, where she had this idea for something called like Net Puzzle Arena, where it would be sort of like Cross Streams, where it's like
A
lots
crossover
of
type thing.
lots of different puzzle games you could play like built into it, and that you could also like really mess with the mechanics. Like, oh, I'm gonna challenge you to Puyo, but you have to match 8 Puyos or whatever.
Oh, okay. That sounds.
And there's like 3 colors.
That's okay. That's crazy.
Yeah, so some of that ended up making it into PCO, like the messing with the mechanics things.
Mhm.
But so I realized she had this idea, and like people really wanted to play Petal Crash online. So I proposed to her, hey, you've already cloned Petal Crash, like you already have code for like this is Petal Crash, and you want to make an online puzzle game. And I asked her if she'd be interested in like making an online version of Petal Crash as like kind of like a practice run for her own puzzle game someday. Like that was how I proposed it.
Mhm.
Um, and she agreed. Like she like, yeah, that sounds good. So she started making the online version, where the mechanics were basically re-implemented from scratch. So
Yeah.
Petal Crash Online and Petal Crash share zero code. They're completely different games.
So Nova just sort of like site reverse engineered it and made the same
Yeah.
game, give or
Well,
take.
yeah, reverse engineered with my help and
Yeah. Okay.
cooperation. Like the original prototype she sent me was just like from watching footage, but like since I was cooperating, I could like clarify exactly how everything worked.
Okay.
So, she, I think Petal Crash. I don't remember exactly, but I think Petal Crash Online might have been in development even before Petal Crash came out. Petal Crash was in closed beta for a while.
Yeah.
Rhythmism was in the closed beta and like pushing the limits of what the game could do.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Shout
like
out to them.
the people in the closed beta server like knew about Petal Crash Online like way before it was announced. It was very like we had like a very early prototype of it that we could test with them, where like there was no lobby or anything. My biggest contribution to Petal Crash Online was like the design of like the lobby and the UI. But
Okay.
like
Yeah.
that was all mostly me.
I think I remember like in the early sort of pre-release up to Petal Crash Vanilla being released, that there may have been like some videos of what looked like an early PCO build or something. Because I remember you had like showcase fights between like Xerxine and Rune, and I think maybe Raz or a couple of other folks in the closed beta server having like sort of exhibition games to sort of show off the verses a bit.
Yeah,
But did that use PC or were you guys just like parsecing or something?
I
Or did
don't remember.
Okay, well,
If we did do an exhibition, it would have been after Petal Crash Online was announced, which would be after the game was out.
okay then. So yeah, that may have been what I'm thinking of then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think does that answer your question?
No, it does. It's again it's a lot of stuff and it's good to sort of wrap this sort of all together. So we're getting a little closer. We're gonna switch over to like the second half where we like talk about maybe the game and show off some of the game. Actually, let's sort of I guess cue over to that now. But I do sort of while we get that ready, I do want to sort of ask one more thing sort of about PCO. This I want to make sure we talk about sort of in the first halfish because it's something I'm also a little bit worried about. With sort of PCO and the skill limit consistently rising and rising, there has sort of been a reduction of like maybe let's say not sickos playing the game, right? Like most of the people, if I maybe put out a call to say, hey, Petal Crash Online wants to play, it's mostly maybe like Digi or Valor SB and I forgot. I think Mib, not Mib. It was I forget. I think Mib. Yeah, Mib also plays right. It's like and again, I love the people who do play come by, but it does always seem like maybe there are people who, and not even like that. They're and again, I really will specify that these are just not sickos. Like these are probably good players who like be really good and play really well, but for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to play. They don't really feel like playing, and so with I guess Petal Crash 2 coming up. Do you think what are your hopes maybe for the I guess maybe competitive scene when one does develop?
Um, so for Pedal 2, like I am aware that like Pedal Crash has an active community, but it's like largely a community of like a small dedicated group of skilled players.
Yeah.
And that if somebody wants to break into that, they have to like come up against this wall of people who've been playing the game for years. And like because the game has a pretty low skill floor, but the skill ceiling is so high that like
Yeah.
when a new player comes in, like the difference between them and somebody they might play with is like astronomical.
Yeah, no, it's scary to say the least.
Yeah, which like I don't know if that's a solved problem in competitive games. Like I like the closest analog we have to something like this is fighting games. And like generally from what I've heard, like the solution to that in fighting games is like in the community where like the people who play will like take the the newer players kind of under their wing and help them improve. And that's not necessarily something I can like implement.
Yeah,
but I do have that in mind as a concern. Um, for example, like in Petal Crash Online and Petal Crash the base game, there's the co-op mode, which was something I specifically put in because like I wanted a non-competitive way people could play together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably something I'm going to explore more in Petal Crash 2, of like more modes that are like not competitive but like cooperative in some way.
Yeah.
Like no concrete plans yet, but that is something I have in mind of like something that would be fun for players of different skill levels to do together.
Yeah. And again, it's not like something that we can quite exactly wave a wand or sprinkle some fairy dust to sort of to fix.
Yeah.
But it is like, it is something I thought about just because like I have not always been a sicko. For a little bit of backstory, right? I was maybe like, I think maybe hard mode was probably the best I could do to like clear in one CC at one point, and then I think just like about 2, maybe 3, yeah, about 2 years ago, give or take, because this was about like late 2021. I had a little bit of a not great time IRL, right, and ended up coping by playing a lot of Petal Crash and learning Portuguese. And
that's kind of a strange idea. Who would have an idea like that where they're not
who
having a great time, so they decide to play puzzle games?
who would do such a thing? Crazy, out of this world, but amazingly, right? I just ended up spending a lot of time on Petal Crash and Portuguese. Ended up playing a lot, and I just did play Petal Crash a lot because it is a game that it feels good to play at any skill level. Puyo is like, you kind of, it's a bit of a walk for Puyo to sort of feel like you're in control or feel like you're doing something. But
Yeah,
Petal
I have
Crash
never
is like,
reached that point.
yeah,
with
right.
Puyo.
But Petal Crash is like, okay, even if you don't know how to chain at all, you can still like, just slide stuff and still do something. Get some of the happy get some of
That
the happy
was
chemicals in, right?
extremely important to me when I was designing it.
Yeah.
Like
And it
I
showed.
think I mentioned before, like the trash attack mode is like closer to my original vision for what the game would be like.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's sort of go on. We do have luckily enough Petal 2. We have a little build. We can see some stuff. Right. We can see what we got cooking so far.
Yeah, we got this is a very early like pre-alpha build of Petal 2 that Jill put together, and she did this fun effect with the logo. There's no music yet, so if there's like a lot of stuff is placeholder, a lot of stuff is unfinished. But this is definitely enough to show off like the mechanics. So, could you like restream this to me on Discord so I can see?
Yeah. Yeah. Gee, let's see time trial.
Time trial is a
Let me get
good
that
like
up.
place to start.
Yeah.
Okay, let's stream.
Man of culture. Let's go.
So is there anything you'd like me to ask
Uh,
about how this works?
I mean, we kind of know a bit of like Well, I will say this. The pedals are very very bouncy.
Yeah.
Like, incredibly a lot of I guess what was it like doing this style of pixel art, because it's definitely more advanced and more like I guess more fancy, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. It's more like an arcade game. This is what I would have done with the original Petal Crash if I wasn't just one person. Like the aesthetic choice to make it look like a Game Boy Color game was entirely a practical one.
Yeah.
It was. I don't really necessarily have a lot of like specific affection for the Game Boy Color look, but it was way easier for me to do that by myself than it would have been to do something like how Petal 2 looks.
Okay, then. So so you have a bit more resources to do something like this. Oh, nice one. To do something like this, and that's sort of how we have this. All right,
Yeah,
so like
because Jill, who helped with the AI, is the lead programmer now, so I don't have to code it, which
this
is an enormous amount of work off my shoulders, so I could focus on stuff like assets.
That's great. Okay, yeah. So and I guess I should also make this clear because I think someone else has mentioned this and you corrected them. This is not going to be a commission.
Oh
More
no no no.
yeah, no, yeah.
No 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 no.
For in terms of commissions, we're going to be stuck with the Game Boy style.
Yeah. Like the commissions are what I do to make rent.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like something I'm like angling to be a major part of my career.
Yeah.
So Petal 2 is not an advertisement for Petal 2 style commissions, no.
Yeah. Just as a clarifier, but still.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so what are the sort of, I guess, what other differences are there here in Petal 2? Because it does sort of it looks a bit fancier, but there's also some mechanical differences that you've thrown in here, right?
Yeah. A lot of these changes are ones I had ideas for before Petal Crash 1 was even finished. But it was just like way too late in the process to start like making major changes to the way the game mechanics work. The biggest thing is the original Petal Crash has this sort of issue. I wouldn't even say mechanic.
Oh, okay. Well, let's not call it an issue. Right? It's a very essential part of high-level play, I would say.
Yeah, but to me, it's a problem that needed to be solved, and it ended up being called.
Oh, I saw it.
Oh yeah.
Did the thing.
We were just about to segue into that. So in the original Petal Crash, if a block gets pushed from two directions at once by an explosion, there's like a set of like consistent but not necessarily like immediately intuitive rules for which way the block goes.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's not like I could just make the blocks go diagonally or something. And then later I was like, hey, wait a minute, I can do whatever I want. I could make the blocks go diagonally.
So just to clarify, so when because I remember that corner case, there's sort of a thing that the playtesters found like pretty close to the release.
Yeah,
and
like
so.
Well, like I accounted for it in the design of the game. Like, it's not like I never thought about what should happen when a block gets pushed from two directions, but I thought that it would be like not something that came up constantly. I thought it was going to be kind of like a bit of an edge case, so that it was okay that it wasn't quite really intuitive. But the way that the game ended up being played, it came up like a lot more than I thought it would. Especially because I didn't account for the fact that like people played with boards that were way fuller than I thought they would.
Yeah.
Like when I play, like I try to keep my board empty because a full board is scary because it might overgrow. But the high-level players in Petal Crash play with their boards like almost sometimes like completely full with only like a small handful of spaces empty.
That's just full enough to not die.
Yeah, because like the fuller your board is, the more blocks you have to work with, and like the more you can attack. So that was something I didn't anticipate, and with the board being full, corner cases came up more often. And like the high-level players got used to it. Like they would still get corner cased like as a verb, where like they'd build a chain, but then like a corner case interaction would make it not work. But they largely counted for it, but it still was a thing that was very, very much like the biggest flaw in the mechanics that I could think of. Oh, also, here's an advertisement for an enamel pin.
Ooh.
Yeah, we have a special Libri enamel pin available as a reward. Where was I? Right. So,
yeah. Corner cases.
Corner cases. So I had the idea like, oh, maybe it could be pushed diagonally. And like I sort of took a cue from Landmaker of the idea of like if the block, because the blocks in Landmaker when you shoot them are kind of moving diagonally in comparison to the grid. And then when they hit like the edge of another block, they like start moving straight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Great.
Okay, so like I said, I was like inspired by Landmaker, in which like the blocks would start going straight after they hit like another block on one side, and that ended up basically fixing all the corner case issues because when a block was pushed from more than one direction, it would try to move in both of those directions. And if there was like another block there keeping it from moving, it would just move in the one direction. But it would be like you didn't have to you don't have to memorize any like priority rules. It no longer matters like which block was closest to the impact site that set the group off. It like and if you just cluster blocks together in a way that looks like it should work, it now usually just works. As opposed to like not working for a reason that's not immediately obvious.
So many years of Roodle training will now be wasted in Petal 2, but it's for the best. But
yeah, I'm apologies to all the Roodle fans out there, but you can now safely forget about it. Like the Roodle, I feel like I have to explain that a little bit. The original intention was that the priority would be, well, first the priority is like whichever block is closest to the impact site is the one that decides where the block is pushed. In the case where both the blocks are equal, there's a direction priority, and it was meant to be clockwise starting from up, but that's not what happened. I thought that was how it worked, but pretty late, like late enough to where the game was out already. Like the tutorial was like, oh, the priority is clockwise, but then like people tested a bunch, was like, oh, the property it's not actually clockwise. It is right, up, down, left. So I had to change the tutorial from saying the order is clockwise to Libri says like the order is right, up, down, left. It's Roodle. It's please remember it. Like yeah. This is gonna be really cool. Setup. This is gonna be a great looking chain. It's gonna be very fancy.
Wait a second. Oh, that's amazing.
So, another thing about the diagonal pushes, besides like fixing corner cases, which is the biggest benefit, is now that there's a new world of cool and fancy chains possible, where you have blocks that move diagonally and match diagonally. So I included a new mechanic called tilt bonus, where if a chain link or a move like has a direct diagonal hit, like the block visibly travels diagonally and then hits another block while it's moving diagonally, you get a bonus, which is either +2 or +5. That counts as like, oh, this chain is as if it cleared 2 more blocks or 5 more blocks. So it's worth more. It's +2 if it hits on the side, and +5 if it hits directly on the corner. Like Landmaker style.
Ooh, that's really good. So I also saw that they're like half chain bonuses. Is that also related to the diagonal movement?
Yeah, that isn't. That was actually primarily Jill's idea. So that's a different mechanic. It's called branch bonus. And what that is that if a chain branches in multiple directions, you get kind of a bit of a benefit to your chain multiplier that you wouldn't have gotten in the first game. So like right now Juicy is setting up a chain, like see those greens in the middle, like see that chain branched.
Okay, yeah.
It split up into multiple groups. So when that happens, for each link that branches, you get like a half added to your chain multiplier.
Pochi and Ya players flipping out right now.
Oh yeah, the Pochi and Ya, big Pochi and Ya heads in the chat, like completely losing their minds.
That is actually like really really incredible to sort of change this, and again just make a lot of efforts to make sure that it's not just Petal Crash 1 again. Or maybe Petal Crash 1 but prettier, right? Like this is actually
actually the game was kind of scoped that way at first. Where the original intention was like, oh, this is going to be like Petal Crash Full Bloom, the arcade edition, where we like fix up the mechanics a bit. But it ended up feeling like so advanced compared to the first game. Jill like kept wearing me down saying, it's so 2. This game is so 2 feeling. That's literally what she says. It's so 2. She was saying it, and she wore me down. I was like, you know what? It is 2.
It's 2.
It is very 2.
We gotta put that in the post and the whatchamacallit advertising and everything.
Yeah, Petal Crash. It's so 2. TM.
It is so 2. We are about Also, you're kind of a little bit out of time. I won't say fully out of time, but we are at about a time
Sorry
where
to
like
ramble so much.
oh no, it's great. If anyone does have any like maybe questions they would like to ask Ashley, do feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can while we sort of talk about the game. You know, if there's anything that we didn't quite cover.
Well, there's a couple things I'll cover real quick with the new
Mhm.
mechanics before we do that.
Yeah.
So another thing, branch bonus only applies in score attack. Branch bonus does not apply in multiplayer because branching chains are already good in multiplayer. Another thing is that the second biggest mechanical change is that the block spawners can no longer be covered. If you move a block on top of a spawner, the spawner now moves.
That's
So that solves like what I thought was the other biggest problem with Petal Crash, which is that your board with like 2 layers of blocks on it would have so much visual information you had to process and it would be overwhelming. Now every spot on the board only has one thing in it. If the spawner doesn't have anywhere to move, it'll get destroyed.
dang.
And okay, that's everything I want to mention.
Actually, to have another bit of a I guess maybe mechanical, or it's not really quite mechanical. It's not quite so much about the game mode. I guess more so about the online mode. Now, 2 will be launching with rollback built in, so we don't have to like reverse engineer the rollback copy this time. But will 2's online sort of have some of these similar, I guess maybe modding or customization features that PCO has?
I don't see why not. I feel like the things that PCO has is sort of the baseline we're working from. Where I can't imagine that there's going to be things that are in PCO that Petal 2 won't have.
Wonderful. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Okay, I don't see much else here. Let's appreciate the juicy chance that we could maybe
Well, did you want to talk? I remember you mentioned wanting to talk about like the story of the new game and like the new character.
Oh gosh, yes, that is something actually I forgot about. Yeah, so yeah, that's some of the questions. All right, so yeah, let's talk about that. The story, right? Petal Crash 1. The story was very much sort of it was a lot of things, a lot of self-discovery stuff, right? It was a lot of sort of Wizard of Oz. You had the power to return home the whole time, if you felt like it, right? But
yeah,
this new character does make it seem like maybe there may be something a bit more. I don't know if serious is the word because they do appear to be a jester, but it does seem like maybe this is a bit more of maybe a more involved story. That'll be like it'll involve the ensemble cast or something like that. Yeah, what sort of, I guess, maybe the idea for the story in 2 as it is right now?
So like since Petal Crash 1, Petal Crash did not have an antagonist. It was all of the characters had like their personal journeys, and the story arc was all very internal. So, like for Petal Crash 2, it's not something you could really retread unless you had a new cast, which I didn't want to do. So the obvious solution is like, okay, now the story, like instead of the conflict being internal, the conflict is now external. We have an antagonist. So, sorry, Juicy's chain distracted me.
As it does.
But yeah, we basically, because the game, the new story, since we can't do the internal thing again, like making the threat of the game external was like the obvious thing to do. So we have our new character who's like the antagonist, our awful villain.
Awful? Oh man, they're like I don't know. Are they like Floria's first stockbroker or something?
No. Petal Crash is going to be tonally quite the same. The villain is not going to be like a nefarious, irredeemable villain.
Oh, okay.
I
mean, it's great, but
but she is causing problems. The new mode is going to take place in a dream world, under the control of the new antagonist.
so the antagonist is going to be like evil knights.
Kind of more or less. Like she is a dream sorceress, so she has power over dreams, like she was born with it, and that's her whole deal. So she has the ability to like suck all of these people into her dream world every night. Like the base of the story is that everybody who had this sacred blossom adventure in the first game, a few months later, now they're all having the same dream every night. Oh,
that's sick.
Yeah, that chain wouldn't have worked in the first game, but now it does. So the adventure mode is going to center around like we have to find out why we're all having the same dream. We have to like find out who's behind doing this and why they're doing it. So our new character is like sucking them into the dream world, and that's the story.
Juicy, you could have moved the blues.
Juicy, what are you doing?
No, okay, but this is so this is like, yeah. Thank you for catching story thing, because I'd forgotten. In addition to sort of like that story though, we also have sort of like, I guess, what looks to be like a roguelike type of mode, and also like spell cards.
Oh yeah. So that's gonna be the new adventure mode, which is the new story.
Okay, so that is like that is stuff that's still like story mode and stuff, and that's probably, I imagine maybe there would probably be an option for it, but it may not be like the default versus with like the spell
Yeah, I
cards.
do not expect the new game mode is called Dream Duel, and that's gonna be the mode that has the spell cards. It has the like countdown attack blocks and the health bar. That's gonna be primarily designed for the adventure mode. You will be able to play it multiplayer, like without playing the adventure mode, but it's not going to be assumed to be like the new default competitive mode. Like the original tug of war mode is still in there.
I mean, we said that about tug of war, like even like like trash attack was supposed to be the default versus, and look where we are now.
Yeah,
very strange.
The tug of war ended up being actually like, to me, the tug of war mechanic felt kind of like a bit of a kludge of like trying to find some kind of alternate way that new people can play the game, but it ended up being actually pretty popular.
We want to see it. Oh yeah, no, because again, it works so well. It sort of lets you play without having to be nice, without having to be
that wouldn't have worked.
without having to be particularly like good, or knowing how to like make a chain happen or something, right?
Yeah.
So this has been very good. Let me double check my list if there's anything else I do want to sort of bring up. I think we kind of more or less caught about everything. I guess I will sort of ask, was there anything that like Petal Crash 1, you sort of talked about stuff that you missed out, like sort of not quite catching corner cases in time for shipping. Petal Crash 2 seems like you guys are kind of not just gonna, I don't think there seems to be anything missing in Petal Crash 2, right? But I guess because this is a question I've asked like all of our guests so far, and at least all of our developer guests. If we do like other type of stuff, we may not ask it. But something I guess I would want to ask you, that if you had sort of like maybe, let's say, unlimited resources, right? Like you had like the best technology at hand, could break the laws of game design, physics, whatever, and all that. After after say like the world hunger and world peace is achieved, what sort of game would you make with sort of unlimited resources at your disposal?
I have thought a lot about this, but I'm gonna dial it back a little bit, to be like less breaking the laws of physics, and a bit more I have the support of like a major studio and a large budget and a team. So my dream for what I would do with that in regards to Petal Crash specifically is I would want to make a Petal Crash RPG. Where there would be like a lot of the mechanics in the adventure mode are ideas I originally came up with for a hypothetical Petal Crash RPG.
Ooh.
Like the idea how you have like a health bar and like special moves and stuff. So if I had unlimited resources, I would want to make a Petal Crash RPG with a story that actually involves like the world of Floria, and like an actual threat to the world instead of it being just about these specific characters.
Okay.
And yeah, so sorry, I'm getting an echo of myself.
No, let me double check. It could be me. Let me turn down my headset a little bit. Okay, so I guess we do have a couple questions here. Let's see. One from Raspberry Floof. Were there any unique challenges you've had to overcome as a consequence of moving away from Construct to a new engine?
Me? No.
Yeah.
That's a question for Jill.
Okay.
I am.
You are doing.
Let me be straight here. I don't know how Petal Crash 2 works. Jill is the one coding it. She's working in Godot and learning how Godot works, and I kind of only have a cursory understanding of how Godot works. If Jill had to leave the country and go into witness protection or something, I wouldn't be able to complete the game by myself. I would need to spend either a lot of time getting familiar with Godot in general and this new code base in particular, or hire somebody else who could do that for me. So I suppose the challenge in this case is that I can't do anything directly because I'm not the one in charge of the code base. So I have to describe everything that I want to happen to Jill, either by doing mock-ups or really detailed write-ups instead of just implementing it myself. So that's new for me. I got a little bit of practice with that with Petal Crash Online, but now it's a lot more pronounced.
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. So you see something. I guess here's one from Notester. Any tips for developing an action or matching puzzle games? Possibly. I guess if there are any programming stuff, maybe I guess logistical things that would help with that. But I guess any tips in general about
making a puzzle game?
Yeah.
I have some general design tips for making games. The ones I always give when people ask for advice making games are: A, try to scope your project as small as possible. Projects want to become bigger, so you don't have to make them bigger on purpose. And B, finished is better than perfect, which is don't spend a whole lot of time polishing things and making them better, or constantly iterating on things and fiddling with them, trying to get them perfect. That is the number one obstacle to indie games getting finished. For puzzle games in particular, I think an arcade puzzle game is a great place to start if you're getting into game dev. Arcade games in general are good because they're generally small in scope. They're meant to be played standing up in an arcade, putting quarters into it. So there's a limit to the scope already, and a focus on getting some kind of really good core mechanic in. So I guess my advice would be do it. It's great.
Yeah. Start small. Don't be a perfectionist on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose if you wanted to, my advice for if you wanted to make a puzzle game specifically from the design angle, I would say make sure the core mechanic of your game is obvious and accessible. Somebody should learn everything there is about how to play your game just by watching somebody else do it.
Very, very good advice. Yeah, very good to have something that's simple and maybe readable or understandable.
Yeah. The new graphics in Petal 2 actually, a lot of motivation behind the smooth movement and the squishy blocks is to convey what is happening a lot clearer.
Ooh, not that.
For example, when Juicy's putting these chains together of these blocks that are pushed right up next to each other, you can see that they squish. They are still getting pushed even though they don't move.
Yeah.
That is a thing that was not obvious to people in the first game, that blocks were getting pushed into each other, and that's why they were matching, because they didn't move, and they didn't squish. But now they squish. And you can see, when that block didn't move, because it was already up to next to another one, it squished. So you can see it tried to move, but it didn't.
Okay, so that's good. That's another way to sort of convey that information. All right.
Yeah. So the new graphic style, a lot of the decisions around it were around making what is happening clearer to spectators.
All right, I'm gonna give 2 more questions before we sort of close out for the night, evening, afternoon, whatever time zone we're in. Right. Here's a story question: are we going to discover time skip style character progression since 1, or is it about where 1 ends? And I think you mentioned it was like a couple months, maybe.
I said it was a couple months. Like I said before, Petal Crash 2 was originally scoped as something of an enhanced remake. So the character designs did not change because it was meant to just kind of be a retread of Petal 1. Originally, if it was going to be Petal 2 from the start, I would have had like time skip designs. It would have been a couple of years later.
Ooh.
But because it wasn't Petal 2 from the start, we have the original designs. So I figured that probably not a lot of time would have passed.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, and here is a fun one. If you were to force everyone to have the same dream, what kind of dream would it be? And I assume this means like everyone in general, not just the Petal Crash cast.
Yeah, if I could force people into my dream world with me, it would probably be some kind of fun adventure dream. Where like you're in like an adventure world all together, and like everybody has like weird and cool special powers. And I would probably be like dungeon mastering for everybody, like making like weird wacky villains for them to fight and like obstacles to overcome. That's probably what I would do if I was told I had to force everybody to have the same dream with me over and over again.
Nice change, you see.
Yeah, that was really cool looking.
Okay, so that's yeah, I gotta say that's probably about it. Again, everyone, Petal Crash 2 is not yet out, but there will be a backer kit campaign coming up soon. Let me pull up the link because we have it here. Remember, folks, you can go to the backer kit site and sign up for email announcements, and that'll really help Ashley. Like if you want Petal Crash 2, and you're not signed up for these email announcements, sign up for these email announcements. They really help backer kit know that Ashley is not fucking around and that she's not just trying to do like some sort of, I don't know, Romanian what's the word, currency exchange scam, right? Like this is a real deal game coming out, and not just a way to scout people. And remember, there's enamel pins. Petal Crash Online is free now.
Another thing I'll mention actually is you mentioned something about Petal Crash 2 style commissions. There will be a high level backer kit backer reward to get a Petal 2 style sprite in the credits.
This is your chance.
This may be your only chance to get that. So
your only chance, folks. You have major key alert. Right? So again,
it will be expensive. I'm sorry. It's very expensive, but do it.
It's very difficult. It'll be worth it. I have to sort of access right now while we kind of have it. Will there be a Fairy Tail or Final Fantasy 14 tax on the Petal 2 commissions? Or the reward rather. I mean,
the amount of money I'm asking for those is going to be so high. I don't think it would be justifiable.
Okay, then look, furries and Final Fantasy 14 players probably. Some of you may possibly be. I may have mentioned twice. This is your chance, right? You want a commission. If you want a Petal Crash style 2 arts, right, of your character, your OC, your Final Fantasy 14, 13, 12 looking style character in these sort of cool, swishy, new 64-bit Petal graphics. Okay, get on that backer kits. Okay, make a pledge, make a donation. Remember, get on the email list first. Right, get on the email list first. We got to get those email. We got to make those numbers go up. Right, it's really gonna help. It's really gonna help backer kit. Not side eye Ashley. Right, it's really gonna help out with that. But again, there's gonna be the enamel pins. There's gonna be different sort of rewards. Also sort of a lot of other stuff. Petal Crash Online is now free. So if you would like to try to and again, if more people who are probably not sickos join, there'll be more not sickos to play around.
We'll also have a Yasodi pin.
Oh, Yasodi pin.
Yeah, I posted that in the bracket manager thing. If Juicy wants to like plop that on the stream to show.
Wait. Oh, that's cool. Okay. So again, if you want to try Petal Crash Online, maybe not put up the initial financial obligation, either paying it or backing it. Petal Crash Online is free. You can sort of get a feel for the game in all of the multiplayer modes without having to put down a dime, right? But again, thank you so much for joining us on Margin Time. Thank you so much for your time and
Thank you.
recounting the experience of like making and sort of developing Petal Crash, sort of bringing it up
Yeah, there's the Yasodi pin.
into the game that it is today. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close out?
I did notice another change I forgot to mention while Juicy was playing. You'll notice like when Juicy was idling out and the board was filling up, the number of spawners that spawn in with each wave in the original game was always 8. Now it's either 8 or half the remaining spaces on the board, whichever is lower. So it is basically nigh impossible to overgrow yourself now.
I wanted to come off of mute and thank you for putting on the training wheels for me. I love that as a change.
You're welcome.
I've thrown a lot of tournament sets.
That's kind of a consequence of the fact that like spawners can't get covered up now, so getting empty space on your board would have been a lot harder if that change wasn't made.
Kids these days, they can't corner case, they can't roodle. All they know is press grow button, draw your Sody fan art, eat hot chip and lie.
Yeah, the walk uphill both ways in the snow.
Yeah,
happen.
We used to do corner cases on the back of our hands early in the day.
I had Roodle on a post-it note on my monitor.
Look, exactly. But again, thank you so much. Thank you to the chat for joining us. I'm so glad to have 3. Petal 2, Margin Time 3. Please join us next time when we interview the guy that decided T-spins, how T-spins work in TGM3.
Wait, really?
Okay. Now,
Wait,